Get out of our mansion. The locks have been changed. From this moment on, you're an orphan. We don't have a daughter named Sloane anymore. Don't ever come back." That was the text message my own mother sent me just before midnight. Not after an argument. Not because I had betrayed anyone. Not because I had stolen a single dollar from my family. She sent those words to the woman who had spent years paying for the very mansion she had just thrown me out of. I was 32 years old, sitting alone inside a dusty construction trailer after another 14-hour shift. My steel-toe boots were still covered in dried mud, my work clothes were stained with drywall dust, and a fresh cut stretched across my palm from a piece of metal flashing I had been installing that afternoon. Spread across the table in front of me were the blueprints for a multi-million-dollar restaurant renovation. I'm a general contractor and a commercial architect. I spend my life repairing broken structures, strengthening weak foundations, and turning empty buildings into places people are proud to own. The only foundation I could never repair was my own family. I read my mother's message again. Then I read it one more time. Not because I couldn't believe what she had written, but because I wanted to remember every single word before she spent the rest of her life regretting them. "We kicked you out." "No. You kicked out the person paying your mortgage. You're an orphan." "No. You abandoned the only daughter keeping your entire lifestyle alive." My parents loved telling everyone they had built a successful life through hard work and sacrifice. It was a beautiful story. It was also a complete lie. The $5 million mansion wasn't being paid for by my father. The luxury SUVs in the driveway weren't paid for by my mother. The designer furniture, the country club memberships, the expensive vacations, the perfectly manicured estate, and the image they proudly showed the world all survived because I quietly paid the bills while asking for nothing in return. They believed changing the locks would punish me. They never stopped to consider what would happen when the person holding up their entire world finally walked away. 48 hours later, my phone rang. It was my father. For the first time in years, there wasn't an ounce of authority left in his voice. There was only panic. "Sloane, thank God you answered. Every credit card has been declined. The bank froze everything. They're towing the cars. We can't pay anyone. You have to fix this. Right now." I leaned back in my chair and listened to the fear in the voice of the man who had spent decades treating me like nothing more than the family's personal bank account. Then I smiled. Not because I enjoyed watching people suffer, but because justice had finally arrived. I took a slow breath before giving him the only answer he deserved. "Sorry, orphans don't have parents to fund." The silence on the other end lasted only a few seconds. By then, the Vance family's carefully crafted empire was already beginning to collapse. They thought throwing me out of their mansion would destroy my life. They had no idea they had just pulled the foundation out from beneath their own. I stood up, grabbed my heavy keys, and walked out into the freezing night air. I climbed into my work truck. It is reliable, slightly dented on the rear bumper, and smells like sawdust and old coffee. I did not drive to the house to beg on my knees. I drove there to verify the audacity of their actions. The property sits in the most exclusive, gated neighborhood in the city. It is a sprawling, modern colonial estate worth $5 million. I know every inch of it because I personally managed and funded the extensive renovations that doubled its value. As I pulled up to the massive wrought iron gates, the main house was dark, but the intricate landscape lighting I had installed was blazing. And right there, sitting in the exact spot on the circular driveway where I normally park my dirty work truck, was the reason for my sudden eviction. It was a brand new Range Rover autobiography. Bright, pearlescent white. It had a massive, absurd red velvet bow stuck to the windshield. It screamed unearned wealth. It screamed entitlement. It sat there gleaming under the security floodlights like a trophy won in a rigged game. That vehicle, worth well over $150,000, belonged to Blair, my younger sister, the golden child, the wellness influencer who had never worked a hard day in her entire 25 years of existence. I put my truck in park. The engine rumbled quietly. I reached out the window with my security badge to swipe the electronic reader on the gate pillar. The machine beeped a harsh, flat red tone. Access denied. I tried punching in my personal 6-digit code on the keypad. Error. Invalid entry. The heavy iron gates remained firmly shut. They were not bluffing. They had actually done it. I sat there in the dark, staring through the metal bars at the house I was financially keeping afloat. I could almost picture them inside, sleeping soundly on the custom orthopedic mattresses I had purchased, secure behind a security system I paid a monthly premium for, completely convinced they had just won the ultimate victory. They thought they had discarded the ugly, useful workhorse and kept the beautiful, shiny stable. Suddenly, my phone vibrated again in the cup holder. I looked down, expecting another cruel message from my mother or a cowardly text from my father, Declan. But it was an automated alert from my banking application. A transaction alert. My primary black credit card had just been charged $20,000 at a luxury designer boutique downtown. A cold, bitter laugh escaped my lips. It echoed in the empty cab of my truck. They had just disowned me. They had called me an orphan and locked me out into the cold night. But they were still swiping my credit card to buy designer clothes. They truly believed I was that stupid. They thought I was so desperate for their elusive love that I would just keep paying the bills from the outside, like a banished servant sliding gold coins under the castle door. They had no idea that they had not created a helpless victim. They had just unleashed a highly organized creditor. Would they realize their fatal mistake before it was too late? I shifted the truck into drive and pulled away from the heavy iron gates. I did not drive to a hotel. I did not call a friend to cry. I drove straight to a secure industrial storage facility on the outskirts of the city where I keep my heavy construction equipment and excess materials. The roads were completely empty, mirroring the sudden void where my familial obligations used to be. I parked under a flickering halogen street lamp, unlocked the heavy metal roller door, and stepped into the cavernous, freezing space. It smelled of motor oil, cold concrete, and damp cardboard. I walked past the stacks of porcelain tiles and pallets of cement until I reached a small, reinforced climate-controlled office space in the back. Inside that room was a heavy, fireproof steel safe. I unlocked it. Inside was not cash. It was something far more valuable. I used to call it the family archive, but tonight, it was officially the Museum of Pain. I pulled out a thick, heavy leather binder. This was not just a collection of random receipts. It was a meticulously organized diary of financial and emotional exploitation spanning well over a decade. In my line of work, you have to be detail-oriented. You cannot build a structurally sound high-rise without exact measurements. And you absolutely cannot survive in my family without keeping score, because Rowena and Declan will twist reality and gaslight you until you start questioning your own sanity. I sat down on a cheap plastic folding chair and flipped the binder open. The stale smell of old paper drifted up. I turned to a tab labeled Medical Emergencies from 6 years ago. There it was. The canceled check and the corresponding bank statement. $15,000. My mother had called me sobbing hysterically, claiming she needed emergency surgery for a severe health issue. I had drained my newly established business account to save her life. 2 weeks later, she showed up to a family dinner looking miraculously cured, sporting a completely new facial structure, a lifted brow, and a designer handbag. It was cosmetic plastic surgery. When I confronted her, she simply waved her hand dismissively and said, "Looking good is vital for my mental health, Sloan. You would not understand. You never care about your appearance." I slowly turned the heavy pages. The numbers just kept getting larger. The small loans became massive investments. The occasional help became strict, undeniable obligations. Here was a stack of consecutive bank transfer confirmations. $25,000 every single month for the past 6 years. That was the exact cost to maintain the $5 million mansion. The property taxes, the absurdly high utility bills, the landscaping crews, the pool maintenance, the premium insurance policies. I had paid it all. Then, my fingers brushed against a faded hospital bill from when I was 18 years old. I closed my eyes as the memory hit me like a physical blow to the chest. It was the middle of July. I had been working a grueling summer job at a local framing company to pay for my own college tuition because my parents claimed they could not afford it. I had slipped on a roof truss and fractured my left arm in 2 places. The pain was blinding, white-hot agony. I managed to call my mother, begging her to come take me to the emergency room. I can still hear her voice through the phone speaker, dripping with annoyance. "Sloan, we are in the middle of preparing for Blair's 11th birthday party. The caterers are setting up the chocolate fountain. I cannot just leave. Take a taxi, and please do not bleed on the seats." I had driven myself to the hospital with one good hand, sweating and nearly passing out from the shock. When I finally got home late that night, my arm in a heavy plaster cast, the party was still going on. I walked through the kitchen, exhausted and in pain. My mother saw me, grabbed me by my good shoulder, and dragged me into the pantry. She looked at me with pure, unadulterated disgust. "Why do you always have to ruin everything?" She had hissed, her manicured nails digging into my skin. "Blair is delicate. She is a sensitive soul. She needs a perfect environment. But you? You are just a clumsy worker. You are like a stray dog we took in. You are an emotional orphan, Sloan. Stop being so incredibly selfish and go hide in your room until the guests leave." That was the first time she used that word. Orphan. She wielded it like a scalpel, cutting away my sense of belonging. She wanted me to know that my pain was an inconvenience, while Blair's minor discomforts were national tragedies. I opened my eyes, bringing myself back to the cold storage unit. I looked down at the binder. Tucked behind a plastic divider at the very back of the folder was a document that my parents had completely forgotten about. It was the original, highly detailed financial agreement regarding the mansion. A document that proved a massive legal vulnerability they were completely blind to. They had always treated me like a silent ATM, but ATMs keep precise transaction records. How long would it take for them to realize that the person they just threw away held the absolute key to their entire fake kingdom? I sat in the freezing storage unit, my breath pluming in the cold air, staring at the stack of evidence. To truly understand the sheer audacity of my mother's midnight text, you have to understand the illusion they were desperately trying to protect. You have to understand Blair. Blair is not just a younger sister. She is a carefully constructed product. On Instagram, she has hundreds of thousands of followers who worship her perfectly curated aesthetic. She preaches about wellness, finding your inner light, and achieving success through positive energy. In reality, her positive energy is entirely funded by my sweat and my credit lines. Just last week, the contrast between her online persona and her real-life cruelty was put on full display. She had decided to open a boutique clothing store in a trendy, impossibly expensive district downtown. Of course, she had absolutely no capital, no business plan, and no idea how to manage a physical retail space. That is where the ugly workhorse was commanded to step in. Rowena and Declan had cornered me during Sunday dinner. "Sloan, your sister needs your architectural expertise," my father had announced, swirling his expensive red wine. "We need you to design the interior, source the materials, and manage the build-out. It is a family project." I knew exactly what a family project meant. It meant I would work for free, and I would pay for the privilege of doing so. But at that point, I was still deeply trapped in the cycle. I was still foolishly chasing that tiny, impossible scrap of parental approval. So I did it. I spent 3 exhausting weeks drawing up plans, negotiating with ruthless suppliers, and personally installing the custom lighting fixtures to save them money. The total value of my labor and the materials I covered out of pocket was roughly $80,000. The day before the grand opening, I was at the boutique, covered in sawdust, doing a final sweep of the floors. Blair walked in with her professional photography crew. She was wearing a flowing silk dress, looking like a serene goddess. She ignored me completely, stepped over my tool bag, and posed gracefully in front of the custom oak display shelves I had built with my own hands. Later that evening, I saw her post on social media. A beautiful, heavily filtered photo of her standing in the shop. The caption read, "I am so incredibly proud to open this space. I designed every single detail with my own 2 hands, pouring my heart and soul into creating this sanctuary. Remember to always chase your dreams. Hashtag self-made, hashtag wellness journey, hashtag hard work pays off." There was no mention of me. There was no mention of the $80,000. I was entirely erased from the narrative. When I arrived at the family mansion for dinner that night, I was angry. I was tired. I decided to actually speak up for once. I looked at my father across the massive dining table. The materials for the shop went over budget by $5,000, I said calmly. I need to be reimbursed for that portion by Friday so I can make payroll for my own crew. The room went completely silent. Declan put down his silver fork. His face turned a dark shade of red. He looked at me as if I had just spit on the floor. Are you seriously bringing up petty cash right now? He demanded, his voice thick with fake outrage. Your sister is launching a massive brand, and you are sitting here nickel and diming your own flesh and blood? You are so narrow-minded, Sloane. You have no vision. Rowena chimed in immediately, sighing dramatically. You are always so terribly selfish with your money. It is honestly embarrassing. Before I could even respond, Declan reached across the table. He grabbed my left wrist, pulling my arm toward him. Wrapped around my wrist was a beautiful, vintage Rolex watch. It was the only genuinely nice thing I owned. I had bought it for myself after landing my first major commercial contract 5 years ago. It was my trophy. Without a word, Declan unclasped the watch and slid it off my wrist. What are you doing? I asked, shocked. Blair has a major networking gala tomorrow night, he stated coldly, handing the heavy gold watch across the table to my sister. She needs to project an aura of success. She needs to look the part. You just wear dusty boots all day. You do not need a luxury timepiece. She will borrow this indefinitely. Blair snatched the watch, her eyes gleaming with greed, and slipped it into her designer purse without even looking at me. I did not scream. I did not fight them. I just sat there, feeling the cold, empty space on my wrist. I realized then that they did not just want my money. They wanted my dignity. They wanted to strip me bare to clothe their golden child. I snapped the heavy leather binder shut, the sound echoing sharply in the quiet storage unit. The memories fueled a fire in my chest that burned away any remaining guilt. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. It was 3 a.m. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name Jace. He is the senior wealth management director at the bank that handles all my corporate and personal accounts. I typed out a quick, precise text message. Jace, cancel all your morning meetings. Have the corporate restructure documents ready by 8. I am coming in, and we are going to create an absolute avalanche. I hit send. I looked at the dark screen. The Vance family loved playing games with high stakes. But what happens when the person they just kicked off the board owns the entire casino? To understand why they finally pulled the trigger and locked me out, you have to rewind exactly 3 days before the midnight text. That was the day I discovered the ultimate betrayal, the catalyst that pushed their greed into the realm of criminal insanity. It was the moment I realized they were not just using me to maintain their lifestyle, they were actively plotting to financially ruin me and leave me holding the bag. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The weather had turned surprisingly vicious, a torrential downpour that forced my crew to halt concrete pouring at the site. Since we were delayed, I decided to head back to the mansion early to grab a specific set of architectural hard drives I had left in my basement home office. I did not call ahead to announce my arrival. I had no reason to. It was supposed to be my home. I pulled my truck quietly into the long driveway, avoiding the crunching gravel. The rain was masking any noise I made. I let myself in through the heavy oak side door that led directly into the mudroom. I kicked off my wet boots and walked silently in my socks down the long, marble hallway. As I approached the grand formal living room, I heard voices. Low, intense, and conspiratorial. It was my mother, Rowena, my father, Declan, my sister, Blair, and a fourth voice I vaguely recognized. It was Marcus, an aggressively slick financial advisor who catered to the neighborhood's elite, promising high returns and asking very few questions. I froze, pressing my back against the cold, silk-covered wallpaper in the hallway. The door was slightly ajar. But what if she finds out? Blair's voice was high-pitched, whining. She sounded nervous. What if she realizes we are restructuring the deed? If she cuts off the cash flow now, my boutique will fold before it even opens, and they will repossess the Range Rover. Do not be dramatic, Blair, Rowena snapped. Her voice was cold, calculating, and devoid of any maternal warmth. She is a stubborn, predictable workhorse. She is so completely desperate for our validation that she will never question the paperwork. She signs whatever Declan puts in front of her. I held my breath. My heart started pounding a heavy, slow rhythm against my ribs. What paperwork? Marcus, the financial advisor, cleared his throat. The strategy is solid, Declan. By leveraging the existing equity in this property, we can secure the $2 million commercial loan under the newly formed LLC. Use that cash to buy the commercial real estate for Blair outright. It is a brilliant wealth transfer. Yes, but the bank requires a primary guarantor with massive, verifiable liquidity, Declan said, his voice laced with anxiety. My assets are tied up. The stock portfolio took a massive hit last quarter. That is exactly why we are using Sloane's corporate profile as the primary backing, Rowena stated, as if discussing what to have for dinner. We slide the guarantor documents in with her quarterly corporate tax renewals. She never reads the fine print when she is stressed with her projects. Once the $2 million is fully dispersed to our LLC, we simply change all the locks on the house. I felt a wave of absolute nausea wash over me. The hallway spun for a fraction of a second. I pressed my hands flat against the wall to steady myself. Blair giggled, a sharp, cruel sound. Wait, we just lock her out? What if she goes crazy and sees us? Let her try, Rowena said smoothly. Once the loan is locked in, the liability is attached to her company. We kick her out, claim she was becoming violently unstable, and tell everyone in our social circle she had a mental breakdown. She will be so humiliated and busy trying to save her precious construction business from the $2 million debt trap that she will not have the time or money to fight us for the house. We get the house, you get the commercial property, and she gets to learn a hard lesson about respect. They were going to trap me in a $2 million federal loan, drain the cash to buy Blair a building, and then throw me onto the street to face the bank alone. They were not just greedy. They were predators. And Rowena was not driven merely by avarice. As I listened to her cold, dead voice, I realized she was driven by a deep, pathetic fear. She was terrified of my independence. She knew my business was growing exponentially. She knew that eventually, I might wake up, find a partner, get married, and cut off their funding. She wanted to financially cripple me so profoundly that I would never be able to escape her gravity. She wanted to break my legs so I would have to crawl back and beg. I did not burst into the room. I did not scream or flip the heavy glass coffee table. If I confronted them then, I would be playing right into their hands. I would be the crazy, unstable daughter they were planning to portray. I needed to be colder. I needed to be smarter. I needed to let them think their trap was working perfectly, right up until the moment it snapped shut on their own necks. I backed away silently, step by careful step, until I reached the mudroom. I slipped my wet boots back on, quietly opened the side door, and walked back out into the freezing rain. I climbed into my truck, my hands shaking so violently I could barely put the key in the ignition. I sat there while the rain hammered against the windshield, processing the sheer magnitude of their betrayal. The mother who birthed me was actively planning to destroy my entire life so her golden child could play shopkeeper. They thought I was a stupid, blind workhorse. They thought I would just sign the papers and walk willingly to the slaughterhouse. But they had underestimated one crucial detail. Workhorses carry the heavy loads, yes. But they also know exactly where all the structural weak points are located. How hard would I have to kick the pillars to bring the entire $5 million mansion crashing down on their heads? The neon sign of the diner buzzed with a harsh, flickering pink light, cutting through the darkness of the early morning. It was 3:30 a.m. I had not slept. I sat in a sticky vinyl booth in the back corner, drinking black coffee that tasted like burnt copper. Across from me sat Maeve. Maeve has been my absolute best friend since we were struggling college students. More importantly, she is currently the sharpest, most ruthless corporate paralegal in the city. She works for a firm that handles hostile takeovers and massive bankruptcy liquidations. She is not easily shocked. But when I called her an hour ago, my voice completely devoid of emotion, and told her what happened, she did not ask questions. She just told me to bring everything. She was currently hunched over her laptop, surrounded by the contents of my museum of pain. Stacks of bank statements, tax returns, and property deeds covered the entire table. Her eyes were moving rapidly across the glowing screen, her face illuminated by the harsh blue light. "They actually did it," she muttered, breaking the silence. She sounded almost impressed by the sheer audacity of it. "I am looking at the digital county records right now. They filed the preliminary paperwork to establish the new LLC yesterday morning. They were getting ready to slip you the guarantor documents by the end of this week. The lock change tonight was premature." They panicked. Why did they panic? I asked, wrapping my cold hands around the ceramic coffee mug. Maeve tapped a few keys. "Because of Blair's boutique. The contractors she hired behind your back to finish the expensive aesthetic work demanded a massive deposit. Declan probably realized he could not stall the bank anymore, and they decided to accelerate the timeline. They locked you out to throw you off balance, hoping you would be too frantic and emotional to read whatever documents they planned to shove in your face tomorrow as a condition of letting you back in." I leaned back against the vinyl booth. The pieces fit together perfectly. It was a terrifyingly simple, brutal strategy. "Let us look at the structure of the house," Maeve said, her tone shifting from supportive friend to tactical commander. She pulled up a digital blueprint of the mansion's financing. "This is where they made their fatal error, Sloane. They think they own the castle. They do not." She spun the laptop around so I could see the screen. "Look at the primary mortgage holding." I squinted at the complex financial jargon. The $5 million property was technically deeded in Rowena and Declan's names. That was their pride and joy. It allowed them to brag at the country club. But the massive underlying mortgage, the actual debt that kept the bank from seizing the property, was structured entirely around my corporate accounts. Years ago, when Declan's businesses first started failing, the bank threatened foreclosure. I stepped in. I essentially became the silent, primary underwriter to save their public image. I paid the monthly premiums directly from my business accounts. "Because you have been paying the mortgage, the property taxes, and the insurance directly from your corporate entity for over 60 consecutive months," Maeve explained, tapping the screen with a manicured fingernail. "You have established a massive equitable interest in the property. They are the names on the glossy brochure, but you're the actual foundation." "If I pull my support?" I asked softly. Maeve smiled. It was a terrifying, predatory smile. "If you officially detach your corporate guarantee and stop the automated payments, the bank's risk assessment algorithms will trigger an immediate default warning. Declan's personal credit score is garbage. Rowena has no income. The bank will demand the balance in full, immediately." While we were sitting there plotting the destruction of their financial universe, my phone vibrated on the table. It was a text message. Not from my mother. Not from my father. It was from Freya. She is Blair's best friend, another wealthy, superficial girl who constantly hovers around my sister to absorb some of her online clout. The message read, "Hey Sloane. Just heard the crazy news. Your parents told everyone at the club tonight that they had to kick you out because you are struggling with severe substance abuse and became violent toward Blair. They said you stole her watch to buy drugs. So sad. Please get the help you need." I read the message twice. My blood turned to actual ice in my veins. They were not just locking me out. They were actively salting the earth. They were destroying my professional reputation in our elite social circles. If rumors of substance abuse and violence reached my commercial clients, I could lose millions of dollars in future contracts. They were trying to guarantee that I would be completely ruined. I pushed the phone across the table. Maeve read the message. Her eyes widened, then narrowed into dangerous slits. "Defamation," she whispered. "Coordinated character assassination. They are trying to isolate you so completely that you have no allies left." She looked up at me. "You want to send a cease and desist letter? You want to demand the money back?" I picked up my coffee mug. The liquid was cold now, but I drank it anyway. No, I said, my voice steady and deadly calm. Sending a letter gives them time to react. Asking for money validates their power. I do not want to fight them for scraps. I want to cut off their oxygen supply instantly and watch them gasp for air. I looked at the digital clock on the diner wall. It was 4:45 a.m. The sun would be up soon. The banks opened at 8. Pack up the files, Maeve, I said, standing up and dropping a $20 bill on the table. I am going to see Jace. And then I am going to teach my parents exactly what it means to be an orphan. The corporate branch of the bank occupies the top 3 floors of a towering glass skyscraper in the financial district. It is a place of quiet, brutal power. Thick carpets, mahogany desks, and hushed conversations involving millions of dollars. I walked out of the elevator at precisely 8 o'clock in the morning. I was still wearing my dusty work boots, a faded flannel shirt, and jeans covered in drywall dust. I looked entirely out of place among the suits and ties, but the receptionist did not blink. She knew my net worth. "Mr. Sterling is waiting for you in conference room A, Ms. Vance," she said, standing up to guide me. Jace Sterling is the Senior Wealth Management Director. He is sharp, pragmatic, and hates unnecessary drama. He was sitting at the head of a massive granite table, nursing an espresso. He took one look at my face, the dark circles under my eyes, the set of my jaw, and closed his laptop. "You look like you are going to war, Sloan," he said quietly. I sat down across from him. I placed my heavy leather binder on the pristine table. "I am not going to war, Jace. I am executing a demolition. I need to sever every single financial artery connecting my corporate entity to Declan, Rowena, and Blair Vance. Immediately." Jace sighed. He had watched the parasitic relationship for years, often advising me to cut them off. He opened a thick manila folder he had prepared. "Let us start with the credit lines. You have 4 black-tier credit cards active. Declan, Rowena, and Blair are listed as authorized users. Remove them," I commanded. "Do not just pause the cards. Revoke their privileges completely and permanently. Cancel the physical cards." Jace typed rapidly into his tablet. "Done. The system will flag their physical cards as stolen or unauthorized upon the next swipe. Now, the joint checking and emergency savings accounts. Drain my contributions," I said. I had deposited roughly $300,000 into those accounts over the last year for household emergencies. Leave only the exact amount Declan contributed, which is 0. Transfer the rest to my private offshore holding account. Jace raised an eyebrow but complied. Transfer initiated. Now, the biggest issue. The mansion. He projected the mortgage profile onto the screen on the wall. "Your corporate entity is the sole guarantor keeping this loan from defaulting. If I detach your business from this profile, the bank's automated risk department will immediately review Declan's file." "What will they find?" I asked, leaning forward. Jace looked at me gravely. "They will find a man with a horrific credit score, multiple failed business ventures, and absolutely 0 verifiable income. The system will issue an immediate demand letter for the entire balance of the $5 million loan. They will have exactly 30 days to produce the cash, or the bank will begin aggressive foreclosure proceedings." "Do it," I said without a microsecond of hesitation. "Detach me. Let them stand on their own 2 feet. Jace stopped typing. He looked at me, professional concern replacing his usual stoicism. "Sloan, I need to be completely clear. If you do this, there is no going back. The moment I hit this button, the shockwave will hit them within hours. They will be publicly humiliated. They will likely lose the house. They will have absolutely nothing. Are you absolutely certain you want to annihilate your family?" I looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows of the city below. I thought about the hospital trip when I was 18. I thought about the $80,000 I spent building Blair's vanity project. I thought about my father casually sliding the Rolex off my wrist. I thought about the text message calling me an orphan, and the vicious rumor they were currently spreading about me being a violent drug addict to cover their tracks. "They are not my family, Jace," I said, my voice as cold as the glass window. "They are a hostile infection. And I am finally taking the antibiotics." "Hit the button." Jace nodded slowly. He tapped the enter key with a definitive click. "It is done." You are legally and financially completely severed from them. I stood up, feeling lighter than I had in a decade. The massive weight I had been carrying since childhood was suddenly gone. I thanked Jace, picked up my binder, and walked out of the glass building into the bright morning sun. I climbed back into my truck and drove to my active construction site. I put on my hard hat, grabbed my blueprints, and went back to work. I spent the next 4 hours inspecting structural beams and directing concrete pours. I needed the physical labor to burn off the adrenaline in my system. At exactly 1:15 in the afternoon, it started. I was standing on the second floor scaffolding when my phone, sitting on an empty paint bucket, began to vibrate. I looked down. The screen displayed Rowena's name. I let it ring. It stopped, then immediately started again. Then a text message popped up. Sloan, call me immediately. There is a glitch with my card. The spa just declined my payment for the diamond facial. It is incredibly embarrassing. Fix it now. I smiled, a genuine, terrifying smile. I did not reply. 5 minutes later, another call. This time it was Declan. I watched his name flash on the screen. The calls kept coming, back to back, relentlessly. My phone was practically dancing on the plastic lid of the paint bucket. Declan. Rowena. Blair. Then Declan again. The panic was palpable, transmitting through the digital signals. They were standing in luxury stores, expensive restaurants, and country clubs, handing over their shiny plastic cards, only to be met with the humiliating beep of a declined transaction. The oxygen was suddenly cut off, and they were finally suffocating. I picked up the phone. I did not answer. I simply switched it to silent, slid it into my pocket, and picked up my hammer. The demolition had officially begun, and I was going to let them sit in the dark and panic until they realized the monster they had created was the only one holding the flashlight. Thank you so much for watching the story so far. If you are enjoying this and want to see how Sloan completely destroys her toxic family, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below with the name of the city you are living in. Every single comment helps the video reach more people who might be dealing with similar situations. Thank you so much for your support. Now, let's get back to the revenge. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my phone was a block of molten panic. The barrage of missed calls and frantic text messages had crossed the line from angry demands into absolute, unadulterated terror. The dominoes were falling, and they were falling hard. I finally took my phone out of my pocket, wiped the drywall dust off the screen, and sat in the cab of my truck to watch the destruction unfold in real time. Rowena had left 6 voicemails. The first was full of her typical arrogant venom. The last one, however, was a masterclass in desperation. I pressed play, listening to her voice crack over the truck's Bluetooth system. Sloan, you vindictive little witch, answer your phone right now. The manager at the spa actually threatened to call the police because my card declined for a $4,000 treatment package. I am standing in the lobby, and they will not let me leave until the bill is settled. Call the bank immediately. This is not funny anymore. You are humiliating me in front of my friends. I deleted the voicemail. I felt nothing but the cool breeze coming through the open window. But it was Declan's situation that truly exposed the rotten core of our family dynamic. He was not just trying to buy a new set of golf clubs. The truth was far more sinister, and the sudden freeze on my accounts had backed him into a highly dangerous corner. I received a furious, poorly typed text message from him that read, Sloan, unlock the platinum card right now. This is a matter of life and death. You do not understand what you have just done. I have obligations to people who do not take no for an answer. Turn it back on. I knew exactly what those obligations were. Months ago, I had noticed strange, recurring cash withdrawals from the emergency fund. When I confronted Declan, he had brushed it off as bad stock market investments. But Maeve, my paralegal best friend, had done some digging. Declan had a massive, hidden gambling addiction. He owed a very aggressive underground bookmaker exactly $50,000. He had been planning to use my corporate credit lines to pay off the debt that afternoon, essentially using my hard-earned money to save his own kneecaps. And now the card was a useless piece of plastic. At 3:15, the phone rang again. It was Declan. This time, I hit the green button and raised the phone to my ear. I did not say hello. I just listened to him breathe heavily into the microphone. Sloan. His voice was shaking. It was a pathetic, reedy sound, entirely stripped of the booming, authoritative tone he usually used to command the room. Sloan, listen to me very carefully. You need to call Jace at the bank and reverse whatever you just did. Right now. I am sitting in the clubhouse locker room and there are 2 men waiting for me in the parking lot. I owe them $50,000. If I walk out there with a declined card, they are going to break my legs. I leaned back against the headrest. I pictured him sitting on a mahogany bench, sweating through his expensive cashmere sweater, clutching his chest in sheer panic. That sounds like a terrible situation, Declan, I said softly. The calmness in my own voice actually surprised me. It was smooth, steady, and completely empty of sympathy. It is a catastrophe. He screamed into the phone, the facade completely shattering. Do you want your father to be put in a hospital? Are you that evil? You're a monster, Sloan. You have all that money sitting in your corporate accounts. Just wire the $50,000. We are family. You have to save me. Family, I repeated the word slowly, tasting the bitter irony on my tongue. That is a very interesting word choice. Let me ask you a question, Declan. Were we family last night at midnight? What are you talking about? Just do the wire transfer. Were we family, I continued, my voice dropping an octave, when Rowena sent me a text message kicking me out of the mansion I pay for? Were we family when she explicitly told me to consider myself an orphan? Because I read that message very carefully. It said you do not have a daughter. Sloan, your mother was just being dramatic. She was stressed about Blair's boutique. You know how she gets. She did not mean it. Oh, she meant it, I said. And more importantly, I heard the conversation in the living room 3 days ago. I know about the $2 million commercial loan you tried to trap my business under. I know about your plan to lock me out and stick me with the debt so Blair could have her little vanity project. There was a dead, suffocating silence on the other end of the line. The kind of silence that happens when a predator realizes they have just stepped onto a landmine. I could hear his shallow, panicked breathing. You heard that? He stammered, all the fake authority draining out of him. Sloan, you misunderstood. That was just a wealth transfer strategy. It was a tax loophole. We were going to pay you back. Do not insult my intelligence, I snapped, the anger finally bleeding into my words. You are going to financially ruin me and throw me to the wolves. So I simply beat you to the punch. The credit cards are dead. The joint accounts are drained. I have officially withdrawn my corporate guarantee from the mansion's mortgage. No, he whispered. The horror in his voice was absolute. No, Sloan, you cannot do that. The bank will call the loan. They will foreclose. We do not have the liquidity to cover a $5 million mortgage. We will lose the house. I know, I said. I give you 30 days before the eviction notices arrive. Please, he begged, and I could actually hear him crying. A grown man, a man who had belittled me my entire life, sobbing into the phone. I am your father. You cannot abandon me like this. The men in the parking lot, what am I supposed to do? I stared out the windshield at the massive steel girders my crew was erecting. I thought about the heavy burden I had carried for them since I was a teenager. You told me I was an orphan, I whispered, quoting the exact text message that had broken the camel's back. And orphans do not have parents to fund. Good luck in the parking lot, Declan. Tell them you are bankrupt. I hung up the phone. I did not block his number. I wanted to see every single desperate message. I wanted a front row seat to the empire burning to the ground. The dominoes were falling, and the crash was deafening. But the ultimate confrontation was yet to come. They were desperate, and desperate people do not just roll over. They attack. And I was ready for them. The next morning, the storm finally hit the shore. Jace called me at 8:30 a.m., his voice tight with professional tension. Sloan, they are here. The entire Vance family just marched into the lobby of the corporate branch. Declan is demanding to speak to the branch manager. Rowena is screaming at the tellers, threatening to sue the entire institution for freezing her assets. And Blair is crying loudly, claiming she is a victim of financial abuse. Security is about to escort them out, but I told them to hold off. Are you ready for this? I was already in the elevator, heading up to the executive floor. I am walking through the doors right now, I said. Have them escorted to conference room C. And make sure Vesper is there. Vesper is a legend in the city's legal district. She is a woman in her late 60s who wears impeccable tailored suits, pearls, and a smile that makes opposing counsel break out in cold sweats. She charges $800 an hour, and she does not negotiate with terrorists. She destroys them. I had hired her the moment I left the diner with Maeve. When I opened the heavy glass doors to conference room C, the air was thick with toxic rage. Declan was pacing the floor, looking disheveled. He had a massive, dark purple bruise on his left cheekbone, a souvenir from his encounter in the country club parking lot. Rowena was sitting at the table, her face puffy from crying, her designer silk blouse wrinkled. Blair was aggressively typing on her phone, her perfectly manicured nails clicking frantically against the screen. The moment they saw me, the room exploded. You miserable, ungrateful brat. Rowena shrieked, standing up so fast her chair tipped backward. How dare you? Do you have any idea what you have done? I had to leave my diamond watch as collateral at the spa. My friends are laughing at me. Declan lunged forward, his face contorted in pure rage. You ruined me, he roared, pointing a trembling finger at the bruise on his face. Look at what happened because you shut off the card. You are going to transfer the $50,000 right now, and then you are going to call the mortgage broker and reinstate the corporate guarantee, or I swear to God, I will destroy your company. I will call every client you have and tell them you are a thief. Blair slammed her phone down. You are so jealous of me, Sloane. She screamed, tears streaming down her face. My boutique launch is ruined because the contractors walked out this morning. They said the deposit bounced. You are deliberately trying to sabotage my wellness brand because you are just a miserable, ugly contractor who hates seeing me shine. I did not say a word. I simply walked over to the massive granite table and pulled out a chair. I sat down, folded my hands, and looked at them. The sheer volume of their delusion was breathtaking. They were literally demanding that the victim they had just tried to slaughter hand them the knife back. Suddenly, the door opened behind me. Vesper walked in. She carried a leather briefcase that looked heavier than a cinder block. She moved with slow, deliberate precision. The entire room fell completely silent. They did not know who she was, but her aura of absolute authority suffocated their screaming instantly. Good morning, Vesper said, her voice smooth and chillingly calm. She placed the massive briefcase on the table and unlatched it. I am Vesper Sterling. I am the senior litigation counsel representing Sloane Vance and her corporate entities. Please sit down. If you raise your voices again, I will have the armed guards in the lobby remove you for trespassing, and I will file a restraining order before lunch. Rowena sat down slowly. Declan swallowed hard, his eyes darting between Vesper and Jace, who had just entered the room and stood silently by the door. We are her parents, Declan sputtered, attempting to regain his footing. This is a private family matter. We do not need lawyers. She just had a temper tantrum and locked our accounts. Vesper smiled her terrifying smile. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents roughly 5 inches thick. She dropped it onto the granite table with a heavy, resounding thud. This is not a family matter, Mr. Vance, Vesper said, tapping the massive file. This is a case of systemic financial fraud, attempted extortion, and predatory lending practices. And the trap you tried to set for my client has just violently snapped shut on your own fingers. She opened the first folder. Let us discuss the $2 million commercial loan you attempted to secure for Blair's retail property. We have the digital footprint from your broker, Marcus. You submitted an application listing Sloane's corporate accounts as the primary guarantor without her signature or her consent. That is federal wire fraud. That carries a minimum sentence of 10 years in a federal penitentiary. Declan's face drained of all color. He looked like he was going to vomit. I was going to ask her to sign it this weekend, he stammered helplessly. Do not lie to me, Vesper snapped, her voice cracking like a whip. My client heard you plotting to forge her digital signature, secure the funds, and then illegally evict her from the property she has been solely financing for the last 6 years. You plan to saddle her business with $2 million in debt while stealing the cash for yourselves. Rowena started to shake. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a sudden, horrifying realization. You heard us, she whispered. I heard every single word, Mother, I said, leaning forward. I heard you call me a stubborn, predictable workhorse. I heard you say I was too stupid to read the fine print. I heard you plot to destroy my life so Blair could sell overpriced candles. Blair let out a loud, dramatic sob. We were not going to destroy you. We just needed a loan. You have so much money, Sloane. Why are you being so cruel? Cruel? I repeated, letting out a harsh, dry laugh. You locked me out of the house in the middle of the night and told me I was an orphan. And now you are sitting here crying because you cannot steal $2 million from me. Vesper held up her hand, silencing Blair. We are not here to debate morality. We are here to deliver the terms of your immediate surrender. As of this morning, Sloane has formally withdrawn all corporate backing from the $5 million estate. The bank has executed a mandatory risk review. Because your debt-to-income ratio is virtually non-existent, the bank is calling the loan. What does that mean? Rowena asked, her voice trembling violently. Jace stepped forward, holding a single sheet of paper. It means you have 30 days to produce $4.2 million in cash to cover the remaining balance of the mortgage. If you fail to do so, the bank will seize the property, auction it off, and you will be violently evicted. Furthermore, the bank's fraud department is currently forwarding the details of your forged commercial loan application to the district attorney's office. Declan slumped in his chair, putting his head in his hands. He was a broken man. The illusion of wealth, the arrogance, the country club bravado, it had all evaporated, leaving behind a pathetic, terrified criminal. You cannot do this, Rowena pleaded, looking at me with tears streaming down her face, ruining her expensive makeup. Sloane, please. That house is our legacy. Where will we go? What will people say? We will be homeless. You cannot put your own mother on the street. I looked at the woman who had tormented me, used me, and discarded me. I looked at the woman who had called me an orphan. You should have thought about the street before you changed the locks, I said coldly. You wanted me out of the mansion. Congratulations. I am out. Now you figure out how to pay for it. I stood up, pushing my chair back. The meeting is over. But the absolute peak of the disaster, the moment that truly scorched the earth and salted their reputation forever, happened right there in the bank lobby. As we walked out of the conference room, Blair was in a state of absolute, frantic hysteria. The realization that she was not getting her boutique, her luxury car was likely going to be repossessed, and she was about to be homeless had completely shattered her fragile reality. In her warped mind, she believed that if she could just control the narrative, she could somehow force me to back down through public pressure. She was an influencer. Her entire life was built on manipulating public sympathy. Without thinking, she pulled out her phone, opened her Instagram app to her hundreds of thousands of followers, and hit the live broadcast button right in the middle of the corporate bank lobby. She turned the camera on herself, tears streaming down her flawless face, her voice trembling with practiced vulnerability. Guys, please, I need your help, she sobbed to the screen. I am standing in the bank right now, and my sister Sloane is trying to destroy our family. She is an abusive, toxic narcissist. She is illegally freezing all of our accounts, trying to steal my new business, and attempting to throw my sick parents out onto the street. She has completely lost her mind. Please, someone help us. She is committing financial abuse. She spun the camera around, pointing the lens directly at me, Vesper, and Jace as we walked toward the elevators. Look at her. Look at how cold she is. She just stole my future. People in the lobby stopped and stared. Tellers looked up from their computers. It was a humiliating, chaotic scene. Rowena tried to grab Blair's arm, realizing that airing their financial ruin on public social media was a catastrophic mistake, but Blair shoved her away. Tell them what you did, Sloane. Blair screamed, acting for the digital audience. Tell them how you stole my money. I did not hide my face. I did not run. I stopped, turned around, and looked directly into the camera lens. I was calm. The contrast between my absolute stillness and her hysterical screaming told a story words never could. But the real fatal blow did not come from me. It came from the internet. While Blair was live streaming her fake victimhood, Freya, Blair's supposed best friend, the girl who had texted me the malicious rumors the night before, was watching the live feed. Freya had always harbored a deep, jealous hatred for Blair's fake online persona. She had spent years watching Blair use people, lie about her wealth, and take credit for other people's hard work. And Freya saw the perfect opportunity to orchestrate an absolute digital assassination. Within 3 minutes of Blair starting her live video, Freya uploaded a hidden video to all major social media platforms. It was a video Freya had secretly recorded on her phone at a party 2 days prior. I saw the notifications start blowing up on my own phone. Vesper pulled out her tablet, tapping rapidly. "You need to see this," Vesper whispered, holding the screen up. In the hidden video, Blair was sitting on a velvet couch, holding a glass of champagne, laughing maliciously. Her voice was clear as day. "Oh my God, Freya, it is so easy," Blair said in the recording. "Sloane is such a pathetic loser. She literally works in the dirt all day just to hand us her credit cards. Mom and Dad are setting up a fake LLC right now. We are going to trap her with a $2 million loan, buy my boutique in cash, and then change the locks on the mansion and kick her ugly ass to the curb. She is so desperate for us to love her that she will not even fight back. It is literally free money." The internet is a vicious, terrifying machine. The hidden video went instantly viral. It was picked up by drama channels, wellness expose accounts, and local news aggregators within minutes. While Blair was still standing in the bank lobby crying into her live stream, the comments on her video shifted from sympathy to absolute, brutal vitriol. I watched the chat scrolling rapidly on her screen. "Liar. We just saw the hidden video. You are a sociopath. You tried to trap your sister in debt. Fake wellness guru. Enjoy being broke. Cancel her. Scam artist." Blair looked down at the comments. Her face went slack. Her mouth fell open in silent horror. She stopped crying. She just stared at the screen as her entire digital empire, the only thing she truly valued, burned to ashes in front of hundreds of thousands of people. She was exposed. The mask was ripped off, revealing the ugly, greedy parasite underneath. But the universe was not quite done serving justice. As Blair stood frozen in shock, the heavy glass doors of the bank lobby slid open. 2 uniformed police officers walked in, accompanied by a detective in a cheap suit. They scanned the lobby, their eyes landing on our chaotic group. They walked straight past me, past Vesper, and stopped right in front of my father. "Declan Vance?" the detective asked, his voice echoing in the quiet lobby. Declan looked like he was about to faint. "Yes?" he whispered. The detective pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket. "I have a warrant for your arrest, Mr. Vance. You are being charged with 2 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of attempting to secure a commercial loan under fraudulent pretenses. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." The bank's automated fraud system had worked faster than anyone anticipated. The moment Jace flagged the forged application, the system automatically alerted federal authorities. Because of the massive dollar amount, $2 million, it triggered an immediate arrest warrant to prevent him from fleeing. Rowena screamed. A high, piercing shriek of pure horror. "Declan. No, there must be a mistake. He is a respected businessman." The officers ignored her. They grabbed Declan's arms, pulled them roughly behind his back, and the sharp, metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the marble lobby. They paraded him out of the bank, a disgraced, broken man, while Blair's phone, still broadcasting live to a massive audience, captured every single humiliating second of it. I stood there and watched them drag him away. I watched Rowena collapse onto one of the lobby chairs, weeping hysterically, her perfect image completely shattered. I watched Blair drop her phone on the floor, paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of the destruction. Vesper turned to me, snapping her briefcase shut. "Well," she said casually, adjusting her glasses. "I believe our business here is concluded." I nodded. I turned around, walked into the elevator, and pressed the button for the ground floor. I had not laid a single hand on them. I had not yelled. I had not broken any laws. All I did was stop paying for the privilege of being their victim, and their entire fake world collapsed under the weight of its own rot. The 30 days that followed the bank confrontation were a masterclass in slow, agonizing destruction. The legal gears of foreclosure do not move with explosive speed. They grind forward relentlessly, crushing everything in their path. I did not reach out to them. I ignored the frantic emails from Rowena begging for a private meeting. I ignored the hostile, threatening voicemails from Declan, who had been bailed out of jail by a shady bail bondsman and was now awaiting federal trial. I focused entirely on my company. I finalized the massive commercial contract I had been bidding on. I secured my own beautiful, modern loft apartment downtown, completely detached from the toxic suburbs. I slept peacefully through the night for the first time in my adult life. Exactly 2 weeks after the bank incident, I had to drive past the old neighborhood to meet a supplier. I decided to take a detour past the $5 million mansion. I told myself it was just morbid curiosity, but deep down, I needed to see the physical manifestation of my victory. I parked my truck a block away, sitting quietly in the driver's seat. The sight was breathtakingly pathetic. The pristine, manicured lawn was overgrown. The massive iron gates were propped wide open. And sitting in the driveway was a cheap, rusted U-Haul moving truck. The bank had not waited for the 30 days to expire to begin seizing collateral assets. Because Declan had defaulted on several other smaller lines of credit that were cross-collateralized with the vehicles, the repo men had already arrived. As I watched, a heavy-duty tow truck backed up to Blair's precious, bright white Range Rover. The red velvet bow was long gone. The tow operator ruthlessly hooked chains to the undercarriage and hoisted the $150,000 vehicle into the air, dragging it away down the street. Blair was nowhere to be seen. I later learned she had gone completely dark, fleeing the city to stay on a friend's couch in another state, hiding from the internet mob that was relentlessly destroying her sponsors and her reputation. Rowena was on the front porch. The woman who used to host lavish garden parties for the city's elite was wearing stained sweatpants, furiously shoving loose clothing into cheap, recycled cardboard boxes. She looked aged, terrified, and utterly broken. The mansion she loved more than her own daughter was formally wearing a massive, bright orange bank foreclosure notice glued directly to the front door. But the most satisfying moment of the afternoon belonged to Declan's final, desperate scam. Through the massive front windows, I could see Declan arguing violently with a man in a sharp suit. I recognized the man. He was an appraiser from a high-end art auction house. Declan had a massive collection of contemporary art hanging in the formal dining room, pieces he always bragged were worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. He was desperately trying to sell them to generate cash to pay his criminal defense lawyer. I watched the appraiser examine a large, abstract canvas with a magnifying glass. Then, the appraiser stood up, shook his head, and handed the painting back to Declan. I could not hear the words, but the body language was universal. The appraiser was disgusted. Declan threw his hands up in a furious rage, shouting at the man. The appraiser simply packed up his briefcase and walked out the front door, leaving Declan standing in the empty room, looking like a ghost. I leaned back against my leather seat and smiled. A deep, genuine smile of pure satisfaction. What Declan did not know, what he was just now discovering in the most humiliating way possible, was that the art was fake. It was completely worthless. Months ago, when I first realized how deep his gambling debts were getting, and long before the incident with the commercial loan, I knew a crash was coming. I knew that the money I had poured into the house was at risk. So, I took out an insurance policy. When they took a 2-week luxury vacation to Europe, a vacation funded entirely by my credit cards, I hired a professional art handler and a master forger. I legally removed the original, highly valuable paintings from the walls. I had purchased those paintings years ago under my corporate entity as investments, meaning they legally belonged to my company, not Declan. I sold the originals at a private auction in New York to recoup a fraction of the hundreds of thousands of dollars they had drained from me. I then had the forger create flawless, high-quality replicas, and I hung the fakes right back on the walls. For 6 months, Declan had been bragging to his country club friends about his expensive art collection, completely unaware he was showing off cheap canvas prints. And now, at his most desperate hour, his final lifeline had snapped. He had tried to pawn his fake prestige, and the world had laughed in his face. They had nothing. No house, no cars, no credit, no art, no reputation. They were completely stripped bare. The parasites had killed the host, only to realize they could not survive the winter on their own. The final confrontation did not happen in a courtroom. It did not happen in a glass skyscraper. It happened in a dingy, dimly lit diner on the edge of the city, a place where the coffee tastes like burnt rubber and the tables are permanently sticky. It was the only place they could afford to meet. Rowena had finally managed to get a message to me through Maeve. It was a plea of absolute, unconditional surrender. She begged for just 10 minutes of my time. I agreed, not out of pity, but because I wanted to look them in the eyes one last time and deliver the final verdict. When I walked into the diner, I almost did not recognize them. They were sitting in a back booth, huddled together like refugees. Rowena's hair was unstyled, her roots showing gray. She wore a cheap, faded sweater. Declan looked 10 years older, his face gaunt, his hands trembling slightly as he held his ceramic coffee mug. He was facing federal prison time, and the stress was eating him alive from the inside out. I slid into the booth across from them. I did not take off my coat. I did not order anything. I just stared at them. "Sloane," Rowena whispered. Her voice was cracked and hollow. "Thank you for coming. We have nothing left." "I know," I said flatly. "The bank auctioned the house yesterday. The proceeds barely covered the underlying mortgage. You walked away with zero equity. We are living in a weekly motel by the highway," Declan rasped, staring down at his coffee. "The federal prosecutor is offering a plea deal. 3 years in minimum security if I plead guilty to the wire fraud. But I need $50,000 to pay the retainer for a lawyer who can negotiate it. Otherwise, I get a public defender, and I could face 10 years. He finally looked up at me. His eyes were red and sunken. "I am begging you, Sloane. I am your father. I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But please, do not let me die in a federal prison. Just pay the lawyer. And your mother, she cannot survive in that motel. Please, just rent us a small, 1-bedroom apartment. We will be quiet. We will never bother you again." I looked at the 2 people who had brought me into this world. The people who had systematically broken my spirit, stolen my labor, and tried to ruin my future for their own selfish greed. It was the moment every scapegoat, every abused child, dreams of. The monsters were finally powerless. They were begging for mercy. I could save them. With a single phone call, I could wire the money, hire the lawyer, and rent the apartment. It would not even make a dent in my corporate accounts. I could go back to being the provider, the savior, the useful workhorse. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it slowly and slid it across the sticky table. It was a printed screenshot of the text message Rowena had sent me at midnight on the construction site. Rowena looked down at the paper. She saw her own words staring back at her. "We kicked you out of the mansion. From today, consider yourself an orphan. We do not have a daughter." She let out a choked sob, covering her mouth with her hand. "Sloane, please." I was angry. I was out of my mind. I did not mean a single word of it. "I love you. You are my daughter." I leaned forward. The air between us was colder than the winter wind outside. "You meant every single syllable, Rowena," I whispered. "You meant it because you thought you had already won. You thought you had trapped me with a $2 million loan, and you wanted to throw me away like a broken tool. You did not love me. You loved what I could buy for you." I looked at Declan. "And you, Declan. You watched her do it. You orchestrated the fraud. You slid my Rolex off my wrist to give to Blair. You sold my future to buy golf clubs and cover your gambling debts." "I am sorry," he wept, the tears spilling over his cheeks. I am so sorry. I stood up. I buttoned my coat. Apology denied, I said, my voice echoing slightly in the quiet diner. I read this text message very carefully. I accepted the terms of your agreement. You wanted me to be an orphan. Congratulations. Your wish is granted. I looked down at them, feeling a massive, overwhelming sense of peace wash over my entire soul. The heavy chains were completely shattered. You called me an orphan to hurt me, I said softly. But you were too stupid to realize that you were actually setting me free. Because orphans do not have parents to fund. Orphans do not have to pay for luxury cars, or country club memberships, or criminal defense lawyers. Sloan, wait. Rowena screamed as I turned to leave. You cannot just leave us here. We have no money. We cannot even pay for this coffee. I paused, looking back at the table. Lying next to Declan's mug was the diner check. It was for exactly $15. I looked at the woman who used to spend $15,000 on a single spa day. Then you better start washing dishes, Rowena. Because the workhorse has permanently left the stable. I walked out of the diner, the bell on the door ringing sharply behind me. I walked into the bright, crisp winter air. I did not look back. Not once. 1 year. It has been exactly 365 days since I walked out of that diner and legally, financially, and emotionally severed myself from the Vance family. A lot can happen in a year when you are no longer dragging dead weight behind you. When you stop pouring your energy, your money, and your sanity into a black hole of narcissistic greed, the universe has a funny way of rewarding you. I want to take you to where I am right now. I am sitting on the expansive balcony of my own penthouse loft in the heart of the city. I own it. Outright. My name is the only one on the heavy, notarized deed. I designed the interior myself, stripping away the cold, fake luxury of my past and building a space that feels warm, authentic, and safe. My commercial construction business has tripled in size. Without the constant, draining hemorrhaging of funds to support my parents' fake lifestyle, I was able to invest heavily in top-tier equipment and hire the best project managers in the state. We just won a massive, multi-million-dollar contract to renovate the city's historical library. And the people in my life? They're people who actually want me to succeed. Maeve is sitting on my couch right now, drinking a glass of actual expensive wine, going over the legal contracts for the new project. We laugh, we work hard, and nobody ever demands a piece of my soul in exchange for basic human decency. As for the people I left behind in the wreckage, the universe delivered the exact karma they ordered. Declan took the plea deal. He is currently serving a 36-month sentence in a minimum security federal correctional facility for wire fraud. From what the lawyers told me, he spends his days working in the prison laundry room. The man who used to mock me for wearing work boots and getting my hands dirty is now scrubbing stains out of state-issued jumpsuits for 13 cents an hour. Rowena hit rock bottom and stayed there. Without Declan, without the house, and without my credit cards, she was forced to face reality. She lives in a tiny, noisy apartment complex near the airport. The woman who used to host diamond galas now works 40 hours a week as a receptionist at a discount nail salon, sweeping up acrylic dust and booking appointments for women she used to look down upon. And Blair? The golden child's fall from grace was spectacular. After the hidden video went viral, she became the internet's favorite villain. She lost all her brand deals, her boutique was seized by the creditors, and her social circle abandoned her the moment her money dried up. I heard through the grapevine that she is living in a cramped studio apartment in another state, working a minimum wage retail job, completely terrified to show her face on social media. They gambled everything they had on the assumption that I would never fight back. They bet the entire farm on the belief that my need for their love was stronger than my self-respect. They lost. I am telling you this story not because I want to boast about a revenge plot. I am telling you this because I know exactly how many of you are sitting in the dark right now, feeling the exact same crushing weight I felt for 30 years. We are constantly fed the lie that blood is thicker than water. We are told that family is a sacred bond that must be preserved at all costs. We are pressured by society to forgive the unforgivable, to turn the other cheek, to keep setting ourselves on fire just to keep our toxic parents warm. But I am here to tell you a fundamental truth. Toxicity is toxicity, no matter whose DNA it shares. If a relationship is destroying your mental health, draining your financial future, and demanding that you shrink yourself so they can feel big, it is not a family. It is a hostage situation. You are not obligated to be the sacrificial lamb for someone else's ego. You are not a bad person for choosing your own survival over their comfort. You are not crazy, you are not selfish, and you are absolutely not alone. It is okay to walk away. It is okay to drop the rope. It is okay to change the locks on your own life. Sometimes, the only way to win a rigged game is to flip the entire board over and walk out of the casino. I was told to consider myself an orphan. They thought it was the ultimate insult. They thought it would break me. But being an orphan just means I get to choose my own family now. It means I am the absolute author of my own destiny. The Vance legacy of greed and manipulation dies with them. The cycle is broken. My name is Sloan. I am a builder, I am a survivor, and I finally have a home that nobody can ever take away from me. Many people say I was too cruel for kicking my own parents out of the house penniless and leaving my father in prison. But I call it survival and justice. What do you think? Did I go too far, or do they deserve everything they got from their own greed? Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have ever had to fight to escape a toxic family dynamic, please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. You are not alone. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another video. Stay strong, and I will see you in the next one.